A death sentence, a ticking clock. One rookie officer faced a choice that could cost her everything. Would you break the rules to stop an execution? Have you ever seen someone judged before the truth came out? Let us know, and if this story moves you, like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. It was an icy dawn, the kind where the sun fights to pierce a blanket of fog over the valley, and so, our story begins. In the quiet northern town of Lansfield, Officer Mara Kellan, a newcomer to the force, already respected for her calm resolve, caught an urgent call on the radio. The voice on the other end trembled, a tragedy in a nearby village. A young man stood accused of murdering his own mother. Mara grabbed her coat, started the patrol car, and sped toward the scene. She had been on the job less than a year, but her integrity had already set her apart. She believed in procedure and in the truth, even when it hurt. The village felt unnaturally still. On the cold ground lay the body of an elderly woman, peaceful and broken by the night's violence. Nearby, a man in his early 20s stood motionless, a heavy wooden stick hanging from his hands. His eyes were hollow, his hands trembled as if he had already accepted a fate he couldn't change. Mara kept her voice steady. "Put that down and come with us. Please, don't make this harder than it already is." He let the stick fall, lowered his head, and allowed himself to be cuffed without a word. At the station, he gave his name, Elias Moreau. No rage, no fear, only a quiet resignation, as though the verdict had been spoken long before the trial. Hours passed while Mara waited for the forensic report and the first statements from local investigators. On paper, the evidence looked clear. The next morning, Elias faced the court. Based on the preliminary findings, the judge pronounced him guilty and issued a death sentence. By national law, there were 2 months before the execution, a window for appeals, or for final words. For some, that span of time is a spark of hope, for others, a slow, unbearable countdown. At that moment, take a breath with us. May we be guided toward truth and compassion, and may justice always walk beside mercy. Write amen in the comments, and give this video a thumbs up to support us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is the perfect time to join our community of hearts that believe in change and compassion. Now, let's continue this story that will leave you reflecting deeply. Elias was brought back to the central station where Officer Mara Kellan was assigned. He was placed in an isolated cell, no cameras, no visitors, only a narrow window that allowed a sliver of pale light to enter each morning. A few days later, a woman arrived at the station in tears. She claimed her home had been robbed and all her savings stolen. Always quick to act, Mara sent a patrol team to investigate while she stayed behind to review the reports. Passing by Elias's cell, she noticed him standing near the window, his gaze distant, lost somewhere beyond the world of walls and iron bars. Intrigued, she stopped and asked quietly, "Doesn't this verdict trouble you at all? Your mother is gone, and you haven't spoken a single word to explain yourself." He looked at her, and for a brief moment, the corners of his lips curved into a faint, almost invisible smile. No anger, no regret, only a strange calm. "What's the point?" he murmured. His words lingered in her thoughts long after she left. Moments later, a call came through. The supposed burglary was false. The woman had withdrawn the money herself, with her son's help. The case was closed, but Mara's mind was elsewhere. She returned to Elias's cell, this time carrying a cup of tea, a simple human gesture that seemed out of place in such a cold environment. As she handed it to him, she said softly, "You still have some time left. If you have a final wish, the law allows us to honor it." Elias accepted the cup, took a slow breath, and replied with unsettling serenity, "I wish to spend every night I have left with a young woman, someone pure." Mara froze. For a second, she nearly snapped back at him, but she stopped herself. "That's not a request we can grant. No one can be forced into something like that," she said firmly. Elias smiled again, a smile that carried both mystery and sadness. "Then why not you?" he asked quietly. "You're not married, are you?" "The law says my last wish should be respected." A wave of discomfort washed over Mara, but she didn't let it show. "I'll think about it," she muttered before walking away, her heart conflicted. That night, sleep refused to come. Elias's voice echoed in her mind, "Then why not you?" The question burned deeper with every passing hour. As an officer, she knew it was unthinkable. But as a human being, she couldn't silence the part of her heart that whispered about compassion, about the strange power of last wishes. Could a dying man's request be immoral, or was it her fear that made it seem so? The next morning, she sat at her desk, exhausted and restless. She couldn't let it go. She decided to learn more about Elias, about his past, about what drove him to such extremes. Without alerting her superiors, she began visiting him daily. Each time, their conversations grew deeper. Elias spoke in fragments, in riddles. Sometimes he talked about his mother with an aching tenderness. Other times, he spoke of the villagers who now hated him, saying only that they need someone to blame. One night, during a thunderstorm that rattled the old building, Mara found herself alone at the station. The others had left for an urgent operation. The rain hammered against the windows as she approached his cell. Elias was lying down, eyes closed, his face almost peaceful in the flicker of lightning. "Do you still think about your mother?" she asked softly. Without opening his eyes, he whispered, "Every day. But now, none of it matters anymore." Mara hesitated for a long moment, then whispered, "Do you truly have proof?" Elias didn't move. He didn't even look at her at first. When his eyes finally met hers, he said in a calm, almost lifeless tone, "No. And even if I did, who would believe me? Everyone's already decided I'm guilty." His words cut through the air like cold steel. For the first time, Mara felt something break inside her, a quiet realization that perhaps she had been just like everyone else, ready to condemn before understanding. That night, she couldn't shake the feeling. What if she had been wrong? What if Elias was telling the truth, and time was slipping away to prove it? The next morning, Mara dove headfirst into the case files. She reviewed every detail, the court transcripts, the forensic reports, the phone records of Elias's mother. Something didn't fit. The last call made from the victim's phone had been to Kellan Dravos, a powerful landowner known for his shady dealings. Years earlier, he had been accused of manipulating land titles to seize property from vulnerable families. Suspicion growing, Mara began a secret investigation into him. Meanwhile, Elias remained calm in his cell, never complaining, never asking for mercy. When she asked him one evening if there was anything else he wanted before his execution date, he smiled faintly and said, "No. I've stopped expecting anything from life, except maybe one thing. I've fallen in love with you." The words hit her unexpectedly, not as a confession of desire, but as a fragile truth from a man who had nothing left to lose. In his eyes, she didn't see lust or manipulation, only trust. That night, as silence filled the station, Mara made a decision she couldn't explain. She removed her uniform, wrapped herself in a simple shawl, and walked toward his cell. Elias sat quietly, his expression calm, almost gentle. She sat beside him. There were no words, no walls, no rank, only two souls sharing the weight of their choices. When dawn broke, there was something new in Elias's eyes, a faint spark of hope. "If you believe me," he whispered, "give me a chance to prove my innocence." Mara reached for his hand and replied softly, "From now on, this is my fight too." She knew she stood at a crossroads. She could ignore his plea, let him die for a crime he might not have committed, or she could risk everything, her reputation, her badge, her career, all for the sake of truth. Her secret investigation soon began to reveal cracks in the official narrative. She discovered that Elias's mother had filed a complaint against Kellan Dravos for illegal land seizure. And the night of the murder, witnesses had seen Dravos near her house. A phone record confirmed a call between his number and the victim's just minutes before her death. Determined, Mara went to the regional chief to request permission to reopen the case. At first, her colleagues laughed it off, mocking her for defending a killer. But once she presented the new evidence, they couldn't ignore it. She was given 15 days to find proof that could save Elias's life. In the meantime, Elias, though quiet, began to feel something he hadn't in months: hope. One day, as she brought him his meal, he said softly, "Even if you can't change anything, thank you. You made me feel human again." Mara's throat tightened. "Your truth," she whispered, "is my test. I won't stop until it's found." Back in the village, she began questioning locals discreetly. Many were afraid to talk. Dravos had power, and everyone knew it. But finally, an elderly woman, a neighbor of Elias's mother, agreed to speak. Her words would change everything. The elderly neighbor, her hands trembling, finally broke her silence. That night, she said, she had seen Dravos's men enter the victim's house. They had attacked the woman brutally, and when Elias arrived, he tried to defend her with a stick, but it was too late. Terrified, the neighbor had kept quiet all this time, threatened by Dravos's enforcers. Mara recorded her statement, compared it with the forensic evidence, and checked the phone's location data. Everything matched. Elias was innocent. With renewed determination, Mara submitted a formal request to reopen the case. During the hearing, witnesses testified, and new evidence was presented. The truth could no longer be buried. Kellan Dravos was arrested, and the story made headlines across the country. In the end, the court overturned Elias's conviction. On the day of his release, he approached Mara quietly and whispered, "You gave me back my life." She smiled softly and replied, "Justice isn't only won in the courtroom, it's also won in the heart." Months later, people sometimes saw them together, no announcements, no declarations, just a quiet bond built on trust, courage, and respect. A story that began with doubt and suspicion had transformed into one of truth and redemption. Dear friends, this story reminds us that not every person accused is guilty. And that sometimes, the path to justice must pass through compassion. Because real justice, the kind that changes lives, begins not with power, but with the courage to believe in what's right.